Well, for more on the hits and misses and the economics of these remakes, let's bring in Brad Szollose. He's a leadership development expert and the author of Liquid Leadership. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rachell, for having me on.
So as we look at the sort of acts and shows and products that are getting this second life, why are these things so popular right now?
Well, it's just like boomers who are nostalgic for Star Trek or even the toys of a generation. If you see, that's a GAF Viewmaster. But if you look at Generation X especially, they were the first generation really raised on Nintendo 64 and Sega machines. So they had all this amazing content, John Hughes films like 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club and Goonies. And so they want to see their brands now being reimagined now that they're in their 40s and early 50s.
And I have to say, The Goonies is actually my all-time favorite film. Now, you mentioned Gen X. Let's talk about their disposable income and how that's affecting the sort of trends as well as the revenue.
Well, studies have found that Gen X is much more frugal than the other generations at this age. A lot of them are what we call the sandwich generation, and that is they have parents who may be older and getting sicker, living with them, while at the same time they may have millennial children in the house, or even Gen Z.
Now, people tend to complain always about the previous generation or this coming generation about what they like, what they don't like. How does the audience for this nostalgia economy differ between these different generations?
Well, I believe that all the generations are the same. It's just that suddenly from 1965 on, we were exposed to very different pop culture, toys that talk to us, and also parenting shifted. So all of a sudden you have 5 generations in the workforce with 5 very different needs, wants, behaviors, and expectations. And that transitions over into the economy as well. So for Generation X, you're not going to see them running out and spending on high-ticket items like boomers may have done when they hit their 40s. Instead, you're going to see them really do a lot of research online and then buy the product on a PC or online. As a matter of fact, studies have shown that Generation X actually buys 20% more than millennials online on a PC.
Now, it's interesting. You showed a couple of gadgets there from back in the day, but with so many shiny new products and shows and things to compete with, what sort of shelf life can some of these reboots have?
Well, if they don't do it right, I'm a marketing guy. I have a marketing firm here in Las Vegas, and I've found that if you want to reboot a brand, you've got to do some sort of priming of the pump. If you look at cartoons like Speed Racer, when the movie came out, it kind of bombed here in the United States because they didn't really prime that pump by showing Speed Racer cartoons on television and getting people excited about the rebrand. And that's incredibly important. Anybody who's going to bring back a brand from that time period has to realize your fan base might be there, but they may need a little priming.
So then what's the best format to make the most of these revamps? Is it better to do one of these sort of expensive one-off things or one-off shows versus a more prolonged and complete reboot?
It depends. You know, we look at some of the things that were rebooted for boomers and they failed. The Addams Family started out as a TV show and became a movie series. It could have been a TV show. They tried to reboot the $6 Million Woman, the Bionic Woman. That kind of failed. So each brand should really take the time out to look at the platform that is best suited for reaching that audience. That might be TV, that might be a YouTube channel, believe it or not. That might be brand new platforms that are coming out, you know, like Hulu and things like that. Streaming video might be better, Netflix, things like that.
And as we look at how our minds work with this sort of product, we saw that neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky found that our preferences for music and other media is formed in our teenage years and our early 20s when our brain is most primed to explore new things. So how do some of these brands and advertisers turn tugging into our heartstrings into profits? What's the secret formula?
Well, try mashing it up. I think rappers have figured it out. You know, you take a piece of nostalgia and a modern rap tune and you put them together. And I think that's a really smart way of doing that.
And we saw that it certainly did bring in a new audience. Any final words for people really trying to wrap their heads around the nostalgia economy?
Just embrace it because you're going to see brands that you didn't know existed. A lot of people didn't know this, but when Iron Man first came out in 2008, that is a pure baby boomer brand. And that movie over that opening weekend did $98 million. But when Iron Man, the video game, came out that very same weekend, it did $198 million. So there's markets that people aren't really looking at because they're not in their face anymore. Video gaming is huge now because it's storytelling, and it may take years to master one of those games. So I recommend getting involved in that.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you so much. Brad Szollose there, leadership development expert and author of Liquid Leadership.
Thank you, Rachell.